Hello there. Today I'll be talking about breastfeeding, or if you like, mother's milk. And I'm going to start my speech now. Imagine if scientists were to discover a drug which could reduce infant mortality around the world by, let's say, 15%. And imagine further that this drug would also make your infant more intelligent. And at the same time, as your child grew up, the drug would dramatically reduce the likelihood of your child developing heart disease, or diabetes, asthma, or obesity. And then finally, if you will, imagine that this wonder drug was available free of charge. Well, actually, this drug, and it's not a drug, already exists. It's called breast milk, or mother's milk. And yet, breastfeeding is not popular today, neither in the so-called developed world, nor in developing countries. In the West, women who breastfeed their babies are often seen as rather peculiar or a bit alternative. In the developing world, of course, the problem is the multinational corporations who persuade mothers that their own natural milk is not as good as the product that the corporations can offer, the baby formulae. But in fact, breastfeeding is simply the best thing that a mother can do for her baby, and it's also beneficial to the mother herself. If a mother does breastfeed her child, that can significantly reduce the mother's risk of osteoporosis or even cancer. And yet, as I say, breastfeeding is frowned upon. If we take the country where I come from, Britain, it has the worst record in the developed world, second only to Belgium, in fact, as far as breastfeeding goes. Some 24% of British babies never taste breast milk at all. And by 6 months, a majority of them have shifted entirely to baby formula. Why is this? Why are we neglecting baby's health and mother's health in this way? Well, some people say that breastfeeding is actually physically difficult for many women, even impossible. That is simply not true. The WHO puts the number of women who have physical problems with breastfeeding as less than 1%. Other people argue that nowadays women prefer the so-called liberation of the bottle. It makes them freer. Well, in the UK, the Department of Health actually asked women about this. They carried out a survey, and it turns out that 90% of mothers who stopped breastfeeding at 6 weeks said that they would have liked to carry on. And 40% of those who stopped at 6 months said the same. In fact, the biggest reason given by most women for stopping breastfeeding and putting their baby on the bottle is their need to return to work. So what can be done about that? Well, for an answer to that question, we might look at the country where breastfeeding rates are extremely high, probably the highest in the world, still at 90% at 6 months. And that country is Norway. What do the Norwegians do? Well, they give their mothers a year off work on 80% pay. And when state employees return to work, they are allowed breastfeeding breaks. Of course, this costs some money up front, but the Norwegians say that it saves much more money further down the line. Because in the end, what do you end up with? You end up with a more intelligent, a healthier workforce that pays more tax and that puts less pressure on the health service. And it has been estimated that if British babies, for example, were breastfed at Norwegian rates for just 3 months, that could save the National Health Service hundreds of millions of pounds a year.